Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, February 21st, 2019. Time for yet another show. Time for yet another school cancellation. Can't really figure this one out, except once again it might be due to conditions in the more rural parts of the county. So I guess this is one of the difficulties of having county-wide schools as opposed to municipal school boards, as they had back in old New Jersey, where they never canceled school. That's not really true, but it seems like it was true. The streets are clear here, but who knows how it is in the western parts of the county. Kids are thankful for it. I'm sure they're very happy, and you'll probably hear from at least one of them during the show inadvertently. So we'll work around that. Lots to catch up on today. My, oh my. As I said in the Morning Post, there's just so many things going on, and the pace of the craziness is accelerating, and it's probably a bad thing, all told. Let's see, there are rumors flying that the Mueller team will wrap up and issue its report as soon as next week. Or rather, that they could do this as soon as next week. But they could have done that yesterday. That could have been how they spent their day. But we don't know whether that's real. We don't know whether the Mueller team thinks this is the case. We don't know whether this is just something that Trump people are saying because it's wishful thinking, or they think that Mueller ought to wrap up his operations. It may even be something that people are saying in and around Trump circles in order to make Trump think that that's true, so he'll calm down about that and anger tweet about something else for a little while, because of course each rage tweet he issues about the case against him tends only to become part of the case against him. So I don't know. This morning, I guess he's going on about technologies, and I see people already poking fun at it, and they're having the same thoughts I'm having, so it's good that we're all in synchronicity here. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know how he got to this, but he's tweeting about wanting 5G and even 6G technology in the United States as soon as possible. He wants that. So there you go. You're going to have it. He wants 3 scoops of ice cream instead. Whatever. I don't know if he knows what he's talking about. He goes on to say it's far more powerful, faster, and smarter than the current standard. American companies must step up their efforts or get left behind, yada, yada. I don't know what sparked this morning. I guess I should just take a look and see if there's any context to this whatsoever. Nope. It's the first thing he's tweeted in 16 hours. Last thing was he had left off talking about Mike Pompeo doing I don't know what. Doesn't matter. I can see it. It's only a few words. Just doesn't mean anything to me. So, all right, this morning he woke up. I guess maybe Fox and Friends is talking about internet technologies. I don't know whether, I don't know. I'm not certain what it is. It doesn't matter. We got our own stuff to talk about. Daily Coast Radio being live now. Bill has sent us off and out the door this morning with our lunch packed, even though school's canceled. With this morning tweet, Kagro X, that's me, reminds you that the president probably hasn't really signed any of the things he's said he's signed or ordered any of the things he said he'd ordered, except perhaps all the cheeseburgers. This is true and was a major topic of mine late at night. But let's see. I have some disagreement this morning. Nick Beaudrot, B-E-A-U-D-R-O-T, Beaudrot? What? I don't know. Well, at any rate, he's, I don't know, is this a real disagreement here? I'm not sure I'd go as far as me, Kagro X, does on needing proof Trump's filed required paperwork. Well, he should. It's foolish not to. But at least with tweets and musings to the press, there's no reason to lead the headline with Trump says X. Yeah, Nick's a little bit behind the times on this one, and I don't know him, and I don't want to talk down to the guy, but honestly, he's right that there is no reason to take his tweets and musings to the press as factual or based in any kind of reality. I'm not sure that you'd go as far as me, but I don't think you've been looking as closely as me, I'm guessing, because the whole thread I spent time on last night started with Daniel Dale's observation that Trump had, pulled the same trick again. I should just pull this thing up here and make sure I have it available for you. And pretty quickly we'll get through some of it and then try and get out of the way for Greg to come in this Thursday. But this whole thing started when I saw Daniel Dale, as you know, of the Toronto Star, tweeting last night. Trump tweeted, this is his tweet, Trump tweeted that he had ordered FEMA to stop giving aid to California disaster victims unless the state changed its forest practices. Now, there's a whole other issue going on right now about Trump and funding for California high-speed rail, which is another story related, as it turns out. But this one was, remember, after the big disastrous wildfires in California. You remember the whole thing when Trump was telling everybody they had to rake the forests like they do in Finland. He insisted that the same or similar practices would be of value here in the United States in controlling forest fires, though the fires in California were not chiefly forest fires. They were wildfires, yes. But, you could rake the forest all you want. This was burning through suburban developments. And they're pretty well raked, generally speaking. It's more or less what defines suburban developments, is the willingness of the inhabitants there to rake just about anything, and frequently, too. You could even tie it into the immigration issue by pointing out that most of the raking is actually done by hired hands who happen to be immigrants from the South. But, never mind all of that. You could build a wall around a forest. I suppose that might work. It doesn't usually because, like immigrants, fire can jump a fence. But okay. Anyway, Daniel Dale tweeting that Trump had tweeted that he had ordered FEMA to stop giving aid to California disaster victims unless the state changed its forest practices. Another why don't you just ism for us. He became convinced that forest management could prevent forest fires. And that being the case, I'm not going to give any more disaster aid to help people who could have helped themselves before, even though that actually isn't true. He goes on to say, Daniel Dale says, after a Freedom of Information request turned up no records, FEMA acknowledged today that it never got any order. And here is a BuzzFeed News article that covers the same topic, and I suppose we'll read that in full perhaps later on in making our case. But Daniel followed that up by this way, by saying, for those wondering, Trump didn't phrase the tweet as if it was itself an order, as he sometimes does. He said, I have ordered FEMA, not I am hereby ordering FEMA or some such thing. The tweet is here. Billions of dollars are sent to the state of California for forest fires that with proper forest management would never happen unless they get their act together, which is unlikely. I have ordered FEMA to send no more money. It is a disgraceful situation in lives and money. So this is the, why don't you justism of saying, well, we just won't fund this stuff anymore. Just as people very frequently say, no more flood relief, no more federal flood relief for people who live in floodplains or for people who live in beachfront property and have their homes flooded by hurricanes. But it's not a practical way of running the government because, you'll find there are people who find themselves in terrible trouble and are in absolute need of assistance. Sometimes, perhaps in the beachfront homes, a little more well-to-do than disaster victims sometimes are. But it leads to frustration that you bail people out over and over again. But the reality is there are people in trouble, economies in trouble, and they need some bailing out. And only the why don't you justists like Trump would ever really consider withholding disaster aid from people who need. How do you know how many fires people there have been through? How many times has someone's house been flooded? You don't know. And it doesn't make any difference. We don't really do things that way. Our version of self-government is supposed to be something of a mutual aid society. But the guy who claims to be a rich billionaire, doesn't want any of the tax money he's not paying going to people who are paying it in the expectation that they'll be helped in times of crisis. So a non-participant is non-participant splaining participation to the rest of us. And we're listening because he's got a gold toilet. Anyway, that wasn't even the major thrust of what I was talking about last night. We can talk a little bit about it later. In fact, we could probably occupy the second hour with it. But as you know, because you're a listener to the show, I have said consistently for a very, very long time that you are never, ever, ever to take Trump's word for anything, especially when it comes to what's in a document or even the existence of a document. I advocated from day one of the last Congress that members of Congress ought to stop accepting written communications from Trump. He's a habitual liar, both in his oral discourse and his written discourse, even where it exists. And it would do no one any good to take him at face value in his written communications. Plus, it would be a great delaying tactic. But as it turns out, this is just one of a dozen or more instances in which the president has declared in no uncertain terms that he has done a thing and made a presidential order and effectively has effectuated the thing, and people begin to A, report it, and B, move on it as if it's true, and then it turns out not to be true. Not a misreading of his written communication, not a misinterpretation of his written communication, but a confirmation that the written communication never, in fact, was issued, never signed, never issued with a mistake in it, sent to the wrong place, whatever it is. And I don't know, reporters ought to be happy to adopt this frame. It allows you the opportunity to add the word or some form of the word purport, purported, purports, purportedly to your reporting. And it makes you sound smart, and it has the benefit of being true. No editor could possibly object to it, and except that they might think you're crazy for saying so, because everybody knows that presidents don't just blurt out BS that turns out to be completely without basis in reality, right? Just without getting too much further into this discussion, I will just note for the record that reporters got back to me last night. Well, a reporter, Chris Geidner, told me last night he's still waiting. He's made a FOIA request. He still, if you think I'm nuts, has never seen the order naming Matthew Whitaker as acting attorney general. Matthew Whitaker was not the acting attorney general. He just said he was, and the president was willing to agree, so the newspaper said that's the acting attorney general. People sued. Those cases have now been mooted because we have a real attorney general, I guess, though I haven't seen that paperwork either, to be honest. But why in the world would the administration hide the single sheet of paper with Donald Trump's signature on it that says that Matthew Whitaker is the acting attorney general if they had it? Have never answered that. And no, I can't think of any example crazier than that. But I can't think of one that proves the point better either. So now my point is partially done for the time being, and we'll talk to Greg Dworkin. Hi, Greg. How are you?
Hey, how you doing? So here's my advice.
Better now. Thank you. Yes?
Well, that's good. It's therapeutic, right? Mm-hmm. So my advice to reporters is simply do a quick, simple substitution.
Okay, yes.
Whenever Trump says, I did a presidential thing, pretend it's Trump saying, I gave money to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's equally likely to be untrue. I gave money to this veterans charity of my own money.
That's, a different
really?
Strain
Prove
of the same
it.
thing.
Where's the check?
Right.
Show me. Because so often in the past you have not done what you said you did. I'm running a charity. Really? Yeah. Show me where the charity is dispersing money to, other than your family.
How do we know that? How do we know that that's the case?
How do we know?
Because somebody said... Hey.
And we are used to that with him when it comes to money.
Now, yes.
Just do it in terms of policy. It's the same thing with the same person doing the same sorts of stuff. Okay, you said you did this. Show me. Mm-hmm. Nothing personal, Mr. President, but based on your 50-year history, show me.
Yeah. I mean, initially, I would guess that there were a lot of reporters and editors who saw the initial stages of David Fahrenthold's work on the Trump Foundation and said, interesting, but ultimately a fool's errand. There's no way that he just ran a fake charity and never put any of his own money in it, used the money only to buy things for himself, and never gave any money.
Honestly, what they said was Pulitzer, if it's true.
Yeah, maybe. They may even have been willing to tell him that. Yeah.
But
had a blogger done it, I suppose.
True, and then in the end, Pulitzer.
Yeah, I guess that's possible, because David Fahrenthold was, he wasn't as famous as he is.
He had his notebook. He was publishing his notebook online almost every day.
True.
Here are the people I called.
Yes, he was the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of the journalism world, sharing his methodologies openly on social media. I think that had a blogger done that, I'm sure it would have been dismissed as,
exactly.
What are you talking about? There's no chance.
But he was part of the club, so people gave him some slack. And I saw real time people commenting on him and saying, "This is really fat. Look at this guy." But if it's true, woe if true,
Yeah.
And it turned, because they didn't want to believe it. They still don't want to believe it. And the impetus to normalize Trump as president still is so intensely embedded.
Yeah, well,
that it's
44
very difficult
in a row
to accept that he did anything other than what a president ought to be doing, in my own mind.
Sure. And I understand it. Like I said, 44 times in a row for 200 plus years, it was fair game to say nobody is going to be that idiotic to just out and out lie about it.
Just look at cable coverage on any given day by Kristen Welker or Kelly O'Donnell.
Okay.
This thing that he just said, which is outrageous, is, to the president and to the president's people, this is perfectly normal, and let me explain why.
Yeah.
No, why don't you explain why it's crazy? You're not
That would be much easier
to explain to us why in somebody's eyes it's normal. There's no obligation whatsoever to do that, but you do it because, like, you think that's what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. I mean, there's a strong tradition of it, but it's been proven, I think, beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a number of there's a number of outstanding examples contained in the thread of just things that that people did contemporaneously say, that's too crazy. If it's really not true at all, that's just too outrageous a stunt. Here, I'm divesting from all my businesses. Here's all the paperwork that proves it. That's all blank, isn't it?
Well, somebody had a really interesting observation. I wish I could credit them, because I don't remember.
I will.
Who said
They're
it.
great.
Just flew by on Twitter. Could well have been Sarah Kendzior, who said, the tendency is for people to look at that and say, that's too crazy. If that were really true, somebody would have done something.
Yes.
So therefore, it must not be true.
Yeah, I mean...
Well, no, actually, it is true. He really did those things.
There's a tremendous...
one of the big stories, I got a whole list of big stories that we have to talk about today.
Yeah, we should do that. Yeah.
Is the McCabe and Mr. Mueller.
Wow, that's like an 8G story right there.
Well, that's the thing. He's... when I was a kid, like 50 years ago, I remember this story. I think I told it to you once. It was like in our second grade reader or something like that, teaching kids how to read, first grade reader. And it was about Abner Tuttle bakes bread. And Abner Tuttle had decided that he was going to make the bestest bread ever. So he took his recipe, and whatever it is, he doubled it. So if it called for 2 eggs, he was going to do 4. If it took for a cup of flour, he was going to do 2 cups. And so he just put together everything, and it smelled fantastic as it was baking in the oven, and he couldn't wait. And then, of course, he forgot one thing. He also doubled the time, and so it wound up burning. And this is Trump when it comes to technology. Oh, you got 5G? I got 10. What does that mean? Well, it's twice what you have.
More G's.
It's got more G's. What else do you need to know?
Right.
So it's crazy stuff. But that's how he rolls. Now, you said that it's only words. How do we know? Because the words don't matter. Let me show you how the words do matter.
Okay.
I'll give you a non sequitur first.
All right.
Just because I was laughing at this morning. Last night, San Francisco Chronicle, their Portal. We love portals. Portal Online. SF Gate had this piece called "Multiple Vehicle Crash Near Donner Pass Creates Traffic Nightmare" on I-80. And New York City Southpaw tweeted that and said, "What's the worst thing that could happen?" Everybody trapped at the Donner Pass. What could go wrong?
Right. We need the Australian woman from Quillette to ponder why that's an issue.
Yes, she'll have to look up the history. Mm-hmm. So, given that that's all so,
yes.
It's words. So? What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, one of the top stories today is, I'll take the AP version of it here.
Okay.
Fed's Coast Guard lieutenant compiled hit list of lawmakers.
Damn Coast Guard.
A Coast Guard lieutenant who was arrested last week as a domestic terrorist who drafted an email discussing biological attacks and had what appeared to be a hit list that included prominent Democrats and media figures, prosecutors said in court papers.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The defendant is a domestic terrorist bent on committing acts dangerous to human life that are intended to affect government conduct, prosecutors wrote in court papers. Quite a lot, actually, is written in those court papers. I sent those court papers along to you. It's in that roundup somewhere.
Oh, right.
Seamus Hughes on Twitter has some of that in his tweet storm about it. He says, hint about the importance of the case was in the opening paragraph. The defendant is a domestic terrorist bent on committing acts dangerous to human life.
Yeah, thanks for saying so.
And then he wrote a draft letter to a well-known American neo-Nazi advocating for a white state. It's a fascinating letter.
Oh?
It says, I'm writing in regards to your ideas behind Northwest migration. To date, I've read most of your books and briefly looked at your website. I'm a longtime white nationalist, having been a skidhead 30-plus years ago before my time in the military. I've served in 3 branches, currently serving as an officer, but never attended college. Okay. And while I fully support the idea of a white homeland, my friends who still play at being a skinhead tell me you're an informant. This is the way the letter goes. This is neither here nor there, nor is it an accusation, but I'm just saying.
What?
And I'm reading this and I'm saying, okay, the guy's disturbed.
Yeah.
But the bigger point here is that he was influenced by Anders Breivik, and he had a stash of guns, and he was a big Trump fan.
That does
and the
happen.
idea that Trump saying things like New York Times is the enemy of the people has no worrisome corollary around it because it's just words.
Yes.
Well, just words matter to people like this. Just words matter to the Pittsburgh synagogue shooter.
Mm-hmm. And the crazy guy with the van sending bombs all over the country.
Right.
Same thing. Yeah.
Same thing.
We've watched.
So, words do matter, even if it's not authenticated.
Right. I guess that's true. And, I guess it's fair to say Trump's words matter. They're lies, and you should catalog them. And that's what Daniel Dale does. Right. Surprisingly, Daniel hasn't been on board with the you should never take Trump at his word on anything, including on documentation bandwagon. But he's busy enough. He's got his own niche.
Right, but what struck me about that weird letter, it was listed as a draft. Apparently he never sent it, or if he did, it was just the draft version.
I got to get back to this thing.
Because basically it says, listen, guy, I'm writing you because I think you're a liar and a phony and a cheat, but I love your ideas and I really want to get together with you.
That is
and I'm thinking, how could people vote for Trump given everything? Well, because they know he's a liar and a cheat.
I guess so.
They don't really care.
And that doesn't seem to bother them. P.S. I understand you're an informant. Here are my plans. Wow.
Exactly. Well, okay, so not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I get that.
There's no knives at all in that drawer. They're all guns. He just shoots his steak into pieces and eats it that way.
Well, I didn't want to say sharpest gun in the drawer. It just it wasn't the right analogy.
Bayonet. Sharpest bayonet in the drawer.
That is one of the big stories. And, of course,
it is.
I spent the morning. I don't normally do this anymore just because unless he has terrific guests, it's just not worth it. But I was listening to Joe Scarborough this morning.
Okay.
Because Scarborough is one of the people on that list.
Oh, all right. Okay.
And I wanted to see what his take was on it. And guess what? He thought it was the most important story of the morning. He may not be wrong.
Was Mika on the list or what?
Unclear.
It spelled right?
And they didn't specifically reference the fact that he was on the list.
Oh.
But he wound up talking about the story for a half hour, about how bad this is and how bad, Trump's words matter, and the fact that Trump didn't automatically come out and condemn this immediately.
Oh, yeah, well, that's he's busy. He's on his 8th G. So,
yeah.
All right, well, that would make it important to me.
You know how long it takes to collect those Gs?
It's, for him, I don't know. You can
You
just
have to
make
wait
up
for
how
them to
many
be
G's
ripe,
he
then you
has.
pick them, then you put them in the refrigerator, then you have to leave them there for a couple of years, let them ripen. It takes a long time.
Bury it, ferment it. Yeah, all sorts of things. Okay. Well, I would think it was important if my name was on the list too, I guess.
Well, I don't fault
it is a
him for
big
that.
story.
I think it's an enormously important story.
It is. He's correct.
And
Also, he's in it.
it's one of the things that's happening right at the moment.
Of all the things there are, that's one of them. So
That's one of them.
he
Well, I
had to
got some
do it.
others, of course.
Okay.
Again, the whole idea that the Mueller investigation is coming to an end next week, which
Sure.
may be partly wishful thinking, but apparently a lot of different sources are confirming that that's what they're hearing.
Okay, I heard someone say they heard it.
And the question is, what's it mean if it's true? And the answer is, we don't know.
Yeah.
Is it that he's got a bunch of sealed indictments we don't find out about? Is it that he's farmed everything out already so it doesn't matter? Is it that he's going to ignore it and keep doing what he's going to do? We don't know. So we have to wait for next week. But next week is going to be kind of interesting because Bob Barr, the Attorney General, is going to be – he's Attorney General, right?
Yes.
Even if we had doubts
I don't
about
know.
Whitaker, Barr is Attorney General.
I
I'm just asking.
think so, but I've never. That's paperwork I haven't seen either. And honestly, to be fair about it, I would say I actually think it might be true. But could someone show me the paper that went to the Senate that was signed by the president that said he was nominated? I began asking that question not with Barr, but with other nominees. So fair
Right,
enough.
but we'll pick up on that after the break.
Yeah.
But, the fact is that he's acting like it. And so
Yeah.
how he reacts to the report, what he does with it, and how the public who is demanding to know what it says finds out about it, it's going to be very interesting.
Okay. Well, yeah, again,
Because words matter.
So it would seem, especially words when they're on a page and signed by the guy who purports to be president. That's purported too.
Yeah, accompanied by indictments.
True enough. Okay, we'll be right back. 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kgrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Greg Dworkin's still with us. Many things to get to because we've spent a lot of time being astonished that the president lies about everything.
Maybe.
But,
this
more.
is a Dave Weigel tweet, which, again, I want to mention to make sure that I don't forget about it. It's kind of a note to self.
All right.
He says, maybe because I'm on vacation and only occasionally opening this dang website, meaning Twitter. Mm-hmm. But the Republicans' mountain comeback by hammering Dems on socialism thing doesn't seem to have much evidence behind it. Special elections so far this year have followed electoral pattern from 2018. And the argument that a presidential election can be turned into a referendum on something other than the president, well, good luck with that.
Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, why not? We'll call that into question. It's I don't know. It's a popular meme, that's for sure.
Brad Parscale says they're salivating over it because now they feel like Trump will be reelected. Okay, good, fine. If that's what you want to use in your fundraising letters, that's just fine. But to remind you of what the far-left Democratic Party looks like with all of its socialistic hellhole policies, Mike Grunwald has a piece in Politico, Trump's war on California. It's undoubtedly a blue state bastion, but far from being a socialist hellhole, the Golden State is thriving after years of malaise. So remember, if they want to run on the fact that the Democrats are the party of Medicare and tax returns, good.
I guess so.
That's fine if that's what they mean by far left. Another example of far left, again, just to remind people, Mikey Sherrill endorsing Cory Booker for president. Mikey Sherrill represents the absolute center of the party.
Yeah.
And it's, she and Connor Lamb and other people who won in the 2018 election are just as much part of the Democratic Party as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and some of the other freshmen who are getting plenty of press. And that's fine. It's a big tent. There's plenty of room for a lot of people with different ideas. But as Gallup told us the other day, and I think we talked about it yesterday, for the most part, Democrats are united on policy, which gives them a solid base to start arguing about politics and who you want for president in a primary season that's going to have a lot of different choices, and people are going to have a lot of different things to say. That's cool. That's all cool.
Okay.
But while that's happening,
the
real leader of the free world, Nancy Pelosi, is moving ahead. Here's a piece from Politico. Pelosi, House moving swiftly to block Trump's emergency declaration.
All right.
And here, of course, this is where I turn to David and say, so process thing. It's going to be a privileged resolution. It's going to be sponsored by Joaquin Castro.
Oh, not AOC. She submitted one, too.
And, she said it was, I write to invite all members of Congress to co-sponsor Congressman Joaquin Castro's privileged resolution to terminate this emergency declaration. Pelosi wrote, noting that the House will move swiftly to pass the bill.
Okay.
The president's decision to go outside the bounds of law to try to get what he failed to achieve in the constitutional legislative process violates the Constitution and must be terminated. So Democrats and Republicans both, she's acting as speaker. I mean, she's speaker of everybody. Mm-hmm. So everybody gets the letter, and it's a rare occurrence that underscores the seriousness which the speaker plans to try to block Trump's effort. Now, apparently what happens is this privileged resolution gets introduced probably today. Then it gets sent to the appropriate committee, and I'm not sure where that is. And then they have 2 weeks or 15 days to work on it, and then 3 days to vote on it afterwards. That's the way it's explained somewhere else. As soon as the House votes on the resolution, the clock starts with Senate GOP leaders who are required under law to put the measure to a vote within 18 days.
Yeah.
But they haven't voted on the resolution. They haven't even introduced it yet. So there's a process that has to take place before they vote. And then after that, there's 18 days for the Senate. I guess it's a parallel process, right? Committee for 2 weeks and then 3 days to deal with it on the floor or something like that.
It doesn't run in parallel. They have to wait for – well, I mean, they could do their own.
It's in sequence, right?
But yes, yeah, that's what you mean, I think, by parallel.
It's a similar process.
Yeah. I thought I read somewhere, too, that one of the various reports on it says, but also we're going to have some hearings on it I think they said the Judiciary Committee first.
Well, that's the thing. It goes to the committee for 2 weeks. You get to talk about it, and then you vote on it.
Oh, I thought that they might do hearings first and then introduce the resolution and then send it back to them and mark it up. But I don't know. There's no reason to. I mean, it would. I was afraid they were doing that anyway. But okay.
So here's another thing, and for all you skeptics out there, guess who's the first GOP senator to publicly say they would support a Democratic resolution if it gets to them?
I'm not a Republican senator, not me. I don't know.
Susan Collins.
Susan Collins. Really? She just said, I'd support that?
On Wednesday. Became the first GOP senator to publicly say she would support the Democratic resolution according to AP.
See. Yes. She says that if I would support a clean resolution of disapproval. I don't know that anybody ever hinted that they were going to lard it up with anything, but I guess people could.
Collins says Trump's move, quote, completely undermines, unquote, the role of Congress. She's pretty committed to voting for this.
That's good. Just because we have to cast some doubt on things, I will point to this clean thing and say, like I said, I don't know that anyone else has even hinted that they would include any other issues in there. And I worry that
if it's a privileged resolution, can you? I mean, you can just lard it up in committee if you feel like, just like anything else.
Yeah. I guess you can. I don't know why you would, but you could. And I'm worried that Susan Collins will just point to it and say, it's not clean. What do you mean it's not clean? This is all it says in here is that we disapprove of the resolution. Yeah, but it's
here's
not done
where
in a
I
clean
step
way.
in and say cynicism is one thing, but this is happening.
Okay. Well, I mean, the vote is happening. We'll see whether she decides whether it's clean or not after a meeting with Mike Pence.
And she will vote for it. The
I
question's
hope so.
going to be who else joins her.
Yeah,
And
it
do
might
you
not
get a
matter.
majority? Probably yes. Do you get a veto-proof majority? Undoubtedly no. But it's still a rebuke nonetheless.
Yeah. And that's the way the process is going to have to work. And the vote counts may very well be different in the first go-round and the second. There are people who might vote for it the first time and vote against it as a veto override. I don't think there are very many people who would vote against it the first time and then say, you know what, for an override, I'll vote for it. But I guess anything's possible.
All right, so we got this Coast Guard guy trying to kill as many people as possible, including people who said bad things about Donald Trump. That's a big story. We got Nancy Pelosi getting ready to introduce a legislative fix to the presidential non-emergency emergency.
Right.
And then our next big story, these are all big stories. We have the McCabe and Mr. Mueller story in terms of what's happening with the FBI. And McCabe making the rounds yesterday basically saying that in his opinion, Trump could well be a Russian asset, is getting plenty of play, just as there's plenty of play saying that he said that on air multiple times yesterday.
Exciting.
But other people saying, well, you lied to the Inspector General, so we don't have to pay any attention to anything that you said, which is kind of a silly response.
Yes, but it's a easy one, and people use it all the time. Oh, see? She's trying now. I think, first of all, Abby, you're wrong. Second of all, that's not a debate tactic.
Right. Well, we got plow people coming by.
Okay. Oh, well, plow's good. You need that.
Especially with all the ice we have. So the other big story, next big story on the list, is North Carolina 9 election fraud. There's an election fraud hearing which is public, and there's a great summary of it actually at Daily Kos. GOP going down for third time in North Carolina 9 election fraud hearing.
It's I saw that. It looked like a good headline.
It's a very good story.
Okay.
And also talks about some of the process that's going to happen, the highlights of what we learned so far on day one. Star witness Lisa Britt testified under oath. This is an ex-daughter-in-law of McCrae Dowless.
Oh, yeah. Complicated.
Testified under oath, admitting to going door-to-door in poor rural Bladen County to collect voters' absentee by mail ballots, which is a felony. In many cases, helping the voters by taking the ballots home with her and they're filling in votes in the contest of that blank. That was day one.
Trying to help you in case you're out of ink.
Right? McCrae Dowless didn't testify on day one. It turned out that under North Carolina law, if they subpoenaed him, he'd get immunity.
Oh, yeah.
So they refused to subpoena him, and without a subpoena, he refused to talk.
Okay.
Day two, mostly centered around the testimony of Andy Yates, who's the, quote, CEO, unquote, of the one-man political consulting firm Red Dome Group.
CEO. Okay.
Right. We learned that Mark Harris, who is the Republican who cheated to win, Harris hired Dowless for GOTV services, get out the vote services in Bladen County shortly before Red Dome came on board. And then Harris handed the Dowless thing over to Red Dome.
Red Dome.
Thereby providing one degree of separation between the candidates. Okay? And accounting records reveal that Red Dome paid Dowless over $130,000 for his efforts, which is a lot of money.
Yes.
It was about 5% of Harris's entire campaign budget. Okay. We also learned that Red Dome and the, quote, CEO, unquote, neither collected nor retained any records of Dowless's activities.
Why would you
He was under no written contract, no statement of work to be performed, reimbursed for expenses without being required to present any receipts, had no record of how many people he employed, nor how many hours they worked. It was never supervised in any way. And the Red Dome guy just kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, well, that's the way we do it.
Yes, that is
$130,000, but he didn't have any records of anything that he ever did.
That is because he knew that it was all going to be illegal and didn't want any records.
Oh, so that was day two. Day three, which was yesterday, most shocking of all, in a surprise appearance, John Harris took the stand. John Harris is the son of Republican candidate Mark Harris.
That is
John
surprising.
Harris is an attorney with the U.S. Department of Justice.
Oh.
Okay.
Right now?
And on oath, he revealed that just prior to his dad hiring Dowless, the son strongly advised his father that Dowless's operation looked shady and probably involved illegal ballot harvesting. And Harris Sr. went ahead and hired Dowless anyway.
Against the advice of somebody who happened to work for the U.S. Department of Justice.
So a tweet from EQV Analytics.
Who are they? Who's
I
the
don't
CEO
know.
of that? Okay.
This story, and it just has a Wikipedia reference to a legal term.
All right.
A medical term. It's a legal term. Willful blindness.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Mr. Willful is blind. That would be a medical term. But this is a legal term, willful blindness.
Yes.
A term used in law to describe a situation in which a person seeks to avoid civil or criminal liability for a wrongful act by intentionally keeping himself or herself unaware of facts that would render him or her liable.
Yes. Close relation
So
of plausible
tried to tell the
deniability.
father that what this guy was doing is illegal, and the father kept saying, no, probably not. There's many reasons why
That's
it might
willful
be
deafness.
legal. I mean, maybe they're just taking the absentee ballots out of these people's houses and walking to their mailbox
Still illegal.
and putting it in the mailbox and putting up the flag,
Yes. There's a reason that's still illegal, but maybe that's what they're doing.
right? And then
His
today
son should have said.
would be the final and most dramatic day with Mark Harris taking the stand.
Yeah. Well, right. And he can say, that's not my son. Show me the paperwork. I don't
Exactly.
believe
I
it.
don't believe it. You're just saying he's my son. We've had these issues before. I want the DNA.
Yeah.
Okay, but the writer of this particular piece of Daily Coast seems to be fairly knowledgeable about it.
Yeah.
Notes that there's a 3 Democratic and 2 Republican Board of Elections.
Okay. I'm bored of elections.
So it will, he says, vote 3-2 against certifying the victory.
Yes.
And then following that, a second vote by 3-2 will fail to order a new election because North Carolina law requires a 4-vote supermajority to order a new election.
Oh. All right. I see. That makes some sense. Oh, hang on. Lots of ASMR happening in the background.
Absolutely. Abby should talk to your kids.
Yeah. Well, he likes dogs. They'd get along, I think.
Yay. So that will throw the whole mess into the lap of the U.S. House of Representatives, who will refuse to seat Harris and order a new election. That will trigger a GOP lawsuit saying, we want a new primary. We don't want this Harris guy. He's damaged. And I don't know that the House of Representatives will go along with that or how that works. So that's where it starts to get to be a little murky. But, you know, just this is one suggestion of how it might all play out, and it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. I'm not certain whether the Congress can order whether or not can be a new primary. I don't know if. Well, I think that would be a state issue deciding
They can't
how
order,
the nominees.
but they could say, well, if you don't, we're just seating.
I guess that's
the
true.
Democrat.
Yeah, oh, right. That's true. That's a good point. They could simply muscle it that way and say, you don't have to do it
I'm
if you
not
don't
telling
want
you
to.
what to do, but
Right.
if you don't,
I'm telling you what will happen if you don't do what I'm
the
suggesting.
opponent wins. Okay, so it's up to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, this will be very interesting, and everyone should take a look at it. It's Doc Dog, DAWG, is the name of the diarist in this one. Just
Right?
one
and
word.
one other piece of information. Well,
Doc
2 more.
Dog. That's like
Information
calling
piece
you.
number 1 is the
Yeah.
coverage begins at 9 a.m. It's live streamed on WRAL.com. There's a couple of places
it's already
online you
underway.
can find it if you want to watch. Also, he says, we know from some of the attorney's comments that a separate criminal investigation is also underway, but it remains under wraps, so we know nothing specific. Once it decloaks, look for McCrae Dowless to do some more hard time. He was previously convicted of insurance fraud
Did he do
for
a hard
taking
time
out a
for
life
that?
insurance policy on a dead guy and then attempting to collect.
Was it one of those voters, maybe?
I don't know. Whether
be.
Harris will also... Do you remember that story? I think we read it on the air. That McCrae Dowless found out this guy had died and then immediately filed for collection. Whether Harris will also end up with a felony conviction for election fraud, Harris, the guy running, remains uncertain. To me,
right.
anyway, says Doc Dog.
Okay, that's going to be
Because after
fascinating
all,
to see
North
how
Carolina,
that goes.
which is not
I
Virginia,
guess.
which is not
Right,
Florida,
true, that's good
but
news.
making its bid.
For a place in the pantheon of.
Let's just say it's
Carolina
not
guy.
necessarily the first that you think of when you think of, in capital letters, good government, like
true.
Minnesota.
Right. All right.
A good government state,
I guess so. Better than this one.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so we have that. Here's another story you may not have heard about, but I think is going to be pretty fascinating. And again, we don't talk enough about foreign policy and overseas international stuff on the show, we're mostly devoted to domestic politics, just like Daily Kos is.
Yeah.
But here is a story in Axios. Netanyahu's political rivals unite in a single party.
Oh.
Hours before the registration deadline for Israel's elections, the two main political rivals of Netanyahu announced Thursday they'll join forces and merge their parties into a single centrist list that'll run in the April 9th contest. Why that matters? It's the most dramatic development in the Israeli election campaign so far. A joint list led by former Minister of Finance Yair Lapid, the leader of the Yesh Atid party, and former IDF chief Benny Gantz, the head of the New Resilience for Israel party, would become the biggest party in the Knesset and possibly beat Netanyahu. The new centrist line, called Blue and White, after the colors of the Israeli flag, will include 3 different parties, 5 heavyweight political actors, and according to the deal, there'll be a rotation agreement for the title of prime minister. Next week, Israel's attorney general is expected to announce he's indicting Netanyahu.
Well, can you?
So the Israeli Trump is giving us a preview of how things are going to go.
You can, in fact, I guess, indict a sitting prime minister.
Right. And on the other side of it, in order to counter
just stand up
this group of people uniting against him, Netanyahu has created and is now allying with a racist far-right party, who I think is the remnants of Meir Kahani's followers.
Okay, could be.
For those of you old enough, you may remember that name.
Know they were around.
He was a U.S. rabbi who immigrated to Israel, and very, very far right. But it's interesting. Essentially, what Netanyahu did is create a party of David Duke and then allied with them so he could have enough, supporters to fight this centrist alliance of the new blue and white party. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens.
Not only foreign relations, but Israeli on top of it all, not just any foreign relations that we have to look out for. It's an important, big development. And I guess what's the chronology of it? I'll have to look at it. I don't know if you know offhand. Was it Netanyahu's alliance with the racist far-righties?
That started to promote people to actually... I mean, everybody didn't like him. They all suspected he was going to be indictable. That made you run and do something else. But the fact that he would then go ahead and try to ally with the true nutters... really, I think, may have been the thing that pushed everybody over the edge there.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can discover the chronology. I want to know who was the first mover in this. Does he ally with them because he thinks it'll help him, and then they therefore say, we got to stop this guy? Or do they say, we are allying ourselves? And he said, oh, yeah, well, I'll ally with whoever's left.
No, because he had to create the party first. It didn't exist. So that came first.
It's another fascinating aspect of this. It would solve a lot of problems if we could just create new parties.
We don't quite have their system.
It's not very stable, actually, but okay.
Yeah. So, we have all of that going on. We, of course, have the differing presidential candidates who are maneuvering all over the place.
Yes.
And that's on the Democratic side here. So lots of interesting kind of stuff there. And we still have that story about trying to get nuclear material over to the Saudis, which in turn would benefit a private company which is helped propping up Jared Kushner.
Yes, which, by the way, since we mentioned them already, I've been fascinated how the Israelis sit by and say, nuclear Saudi Arabia? Yes, please.
Well, they're our allies against Iran.
We think so, but...
yeah, I mean, what could go wrong? It's
right.
Donner Pass stuff.
Exactly. I forgot to mention this yesterday, but today will be a good day to bring this thing back up. I mean, in a country where the entirety of the political leadership is absolutist, and what it takes to get a new political leader is another member of the family somehow tricks the current crown prince into going to the bar at the Ritz-Carlton and then turns it into a prison. New leadership, new people, and all of whom are essentially still, for all the changes there's been in leadership, and they're not that huge, they all still look to the religious infrastructure, the Wahhabi infrastructure, for their legitimacy, and putting nuclear weapons in the hands of Wahhabist, religious fanatics. I don't see how it could go that wrong, right? I mean,
what could possibly go wrong? So before I leave,
hope Yemen doesn't win that war.
Oh yeah. I'll leave you with one completely different piece, and it's material for the second hour if you feel like it, or even tomorrow. But this is by Van Newkirk. I happened to come across him on that same Morning Joe show talking about this new article he had. It's called "The Racial Divide is the Political Divide. White, Black, and Hispanic people hold distinctly different views of American identity and values." This article is based on a new poll conducted by the Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, one of my favorite polls. And the Atlantic delves into these differences and finds distinct racial outlooks on the most fundamental issues of American identity and values. The poll reaffirms previous findings of deep racial differences and policy preferences, and also confirms the picture of deep structural barriers to the ballot for Black and Latino voters, barriers that played a role in the 2016 elections and the 2018 midterms.
That sounds familiar, certainly. I'd be interested to see how differently they see basic American values. Interesting. Okay, well.
For example, 76% of white people and 74% of Hispanics think that civil liberties such as freedom of speech are a very important piece of American identity. Only 61% of Black respondents feel so. Over half of Black respondents think a belief in capitalism isn't a very important part of that identity, whereas white and Hispanic people think it's somewhat important or very important.
Okay.
45% of Hispanic respondents said racial, ethnic, and religious diversity makes the country stronger. Only 32% of whites think that. And white respondents are most likely to say diversity makes the country weaker or to be ambivalent altogether about the idea. Right? Black people overwhelmingly identify as Democrats.
Yes.
Black conservatives who identified as Republican appear to be vanishing.
Vanishing. Okay, yeah, all right.
Thank you, Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, he makes it very hard.
Right? So. White voters might be moving in the other direction away from considering racism a problem and philosophically seem to be deprioritizing the importance of diversity in favor of an embrace of capitalism, nationalism, and individual liberty. And according to researcher Adrienne Pantoja, an analyst with the Latino Decisions political opinion research firm, Latino voters have increasingly made opposing the GOP agenda a top political priority in the age of President Donald Trump. That's fascinating if you're old enough to remember Ronald Reagan saying, why shouldn't all these people come into the country from down south? They're future Republicans.
There was a time when it was possible. There was a big push on for they're heavily Catholic, and there was a big push on to ally
conservative,
Catholics with conservatives.
In terms of certain parts of their identity.
True.
Abortion, for example.
Right.
Socially conservative. And the profiles of the Republican and Democratic parties have shifted accordingly. It's a fascinating article, and I'll leave the rest of it with you. But it talks about policy and what it means for minimum wage promises and all sorts of other things, which will immediately be seen as racialized. And if so, then certain people will vote one way and certain people vote another. And that, I think, was striking to me because there was yet another different article in USA Today that I'll find for you, that talked about how Democrats can appeal to so many different factions and win. And the answer is not to make it about factions, right? You don't talk about minimum wage in terms of being good for a particular group of people because anybody not in that group is going to resent it. You talk about minimum wage being good for everybody. You talk about things being universal rather than particular.
Okay.
Right? Gun control isn't a black-white thing. Gun control is like all your kids are in schools. Schools isn't a black-white thing. Everybody goes to school. That kind of thing. Talk about it in a universalist way, and that's the best way to reach everybody. And not immediately start, breaking groups apart and separating them. Of course, it's the exact opposite of what Donald Trump does. But,
yes, right.
The one who did that the best and won with it was Barack Obama.
Oh, Yeah, he was pretty good at that, wasn't he? I was wondering, maybe that's the reason why, as we were reading yesterday, Trump has this record number of judicial nominees who either won't say that they agree with or outright disagree with Brown versus Board of Education. If we segregate everybody, then we can make guns black and white issue again. Good.
Right.
Let's try
that. I suppose.
Yeah. Well, all right. This it makes a lot of sense. The examples that you were reading out, you can understand in most cases. Well, okay, I see there would be a difference, and I can think of reasons why. So yeah, very well. We'll have to keep it in mind at the very least if we can't find time to read through the entirety of the study.
Mm-hmm.
We'll share it
anyway. There you have it. I'm leaving.
Okay.
You're on.
Very good. I mean,
enjoy.
Not that good, really, honestly, that you're leaving. It was a good show. Don't leave.
It was great. I'll be back on Monday, and we'll talk again.
Okay.
This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning, terrified of being by himself.
Yeah. I'm not that good at it,
But we'll be back.
Okay.
Take care and enjoy.
Very good. Thanks, Greg. We'll see you on Monday. And unless weather intervenes somehow, I'm still waiting for that to somehow cancel the show and be like the kids and enjoy a snow day. All right, yes, break coming up. I hear you, Mr. Alarm Clock, and we'll have the music standing by. Let's see. Now, during the early part of the show, just to note for the record, how in what capacity was Armando commenting on things? Back when we were talking about the socialism, the creeping socialism working its way into our electoral season. What's the upside he was running? What's the upside of running on socialism, especially when it's not actually socialism? And why would we want to debate the socialism label? I don't know that we're going to have that much choice. I mean, you could just simply say, I'm not debating it and walk away from it and see whether that works. It'll work with the right people, and you'll never be able to convince the wrong people that it's worth spending your time on. So I see your point there. Yeah, I don't know. I think they're going to force it on us regardless, and we can still choose to ignore it. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Time for our second hour here. In exiting the previous segment, reading about Armando's objections to the idea of even bothering to debate whether or not we're running on socialism or whether they're democratic socialists or not, especially if it isn't. And I don't know. I guess it's still a definition, possibly still in flux. I have no idea whether there's generalized agreement on what is and isn't socialism. Partially to blame in all of this, of course, is the long-standing Republican habit of simply labeling everything that they're running against, or rather, I guess more clearly, everything that Democrats are running on as socialism, and just depending on people being afraid of the word and that carrying all the weight that needs to be carried. It came up in my mind this morning. I did not grab the tweet because it was of no importance to me at the time, but things have changed. That Elizabeth Warren, I guess, was announcing, it wasn't a formal announcement, I guess in answering somebody's question, essentially, are you going to waste your time defending against the charge that all Democrats are running as socialists now, but, they're not, and she went out of her way to say, well, I'm going to refer to myself as a Democratic something else. Was it, I don't know what she chose, but she was doing so in order to delineate between herself and, her positions and what is now being taken as democratic socialism. And it struck me that this was just like what we were discussing 2 days ago when Richard Painter said, look, all we need to do is say that we're not socialists, and then that'll be the end of it. And it won't be. I mean, it could be the last thing we have to say on the issue, but I don't know whether that works with the media, whether the lack of oxygen kills the story, or whether, remember, we're dealing with the media that somehow made a year-long affair of her emails when there was no oxygen there either. So I don't know. I don't think I can predict for you where the press and the herd mentality that sometimes governs it takes them. There are thankfully always outliers, and they tend to be our friends in the media at that, but it doesn't really seem to affect the way the mainstream deals with these things. So Greg has sent me Jill Lawrence's tweet, and that must be the one I saw, or one of many that I saw. I guess Axios had some write-up on it. Jill Lawrence saw that write-up, and that will serve for our purposes. Thanks very much, Greg. Elizabeth Warren on why she's a Democratic capitalist, not a Democratic socialist. I thought the only word I could think of that she would have appended to Democratic in order to counter the socialist charge, if that's what it is, was capitalist. But I thought, no, that's too dumb a label. That can't possibly be it. But guess what? That's it. Damn it. So I don't hold out great hope for this strategy, but Elizabeth Warren on why she's a Democratic capitalist, not a Democratic socialist. I see the value of markets, and I don't think that modern socialism excludes seeing the value of markets, which is why I think socialism is still a definition in flux. If you're pointing to, Scandinavian socialism, I don't think that there's any doubt but that they are players in the market and know it. So I don't know. Let's see. Should we look at this? I guess number 6 in the Axios roundup is the item we're talking about. Mike Allen's Axios, and the other one, AM. Yeah, number 6. Elizabeth Warren. I don't know. I guess he's got a list. Is it the top 10 each morning? Who knows? Number 6 here is Elizabeth Warren. I see the value of markets. It's like the sixth sense. It's getting cold in here, and I see the value of markets. All right. Senator Elizabeth Warren tells Tommy Viator, is that how he pronounces it, on Pod Save America. It's another podcast, apparently. I've never heard of it. Why she identifies as a Democratic capitalist rather than, like Senator Bernie Sanders, a Democratic socialist. The answer to that is because we see things slightly differently. All right. Whatever. I'm sure it sounded like really intelligent at the time. I see the value of markets and that they can produce a lot of good if they have rules. And again, I don't need to do any, and I don't mean to do any cheerleading for Bernie Sanders here, but is there some indication that he doesn't see the value of markets? I don't know. It's too early, both too early in this cycle and too early this morning to parse it that way. Of course he sees it. She's just talking about herself. Okay, so she sees the value of markets. They can produce a lot of good if they have rules. But let us all be clear, very important words, markets without rules are theft, and I am opposed to theft. I don't know that that's necessarily the case, but I am opposed to theft, so I'm with her there on that one. There is a reason that the folks on Wall Street, the big CEOs, don't want me to even be in the Senate, because I know how the system works and how it can work when it works right, and how these are the guys who are ripping it off and make it not work. That's fine. Doesn't really answer the question, but it's good rhetoric, and there's no answer to the question, so what do I care? As long as she doesn't say something completely stupid and counterproductive for everybody in her answer to a fairly stupid question, to be honest. But, all right, it happened. It was in Axios. Now we got to talk about it. So, okay. Thank you for helping us straighten that one out with some primary sources. Now I can include them, and we can round them up in our links, and I can prove to you, unlike what Donald Trump does, that these things actually happened and were actually said, and that's why I'm reacting to them. Sometimes I misread them, but I'll give you the links nonetheless, and you can do what you want with them. Okay, back to our original topic from the morning. Knew it was going to take a long time. Couldn't get it all in before Greg came on board. But like I said, last night, a little bit of a discussion sparked by Daniel Dale's observation that Trump had at one point announced that he had already, actually, honest to God, really done this, ordered FEMA to stop giving aid to California disaster victims unless the state changed its forest practices. And guess what? It turns out that that's not true. BuzzFeed News actually had that story. We should at least take a look at that. Brianna Sachs and Hamid Alaziz with an E in there instead of an I. It's usually Ali Aziz when we anglicize it, but I guess it's Ale, A-L-E, Aziz on this one. BuzzFeed News. Again, Trump said he ordered his administration to withhold wildfire aid. Oh, not just forest fire aid. Wildfire aid to California. FEMA says he never did. FEMA director, I guess you're fired. Brock, he was on his way out anyway, right? He was tired of commuting from, where was he commuting from? North Carolina. Oh, that corrupt place. I wonder if he was commuting from the 9th District. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? I don't know where he lived. The president tweeted that he was cutting off disaster assistance to wildfire survivors to punish California officials, which would have been enormously stupid, but no record of such an order exists, and it may be because there were adults in the White House who said, no, you can't do that. It may be that he's lazy and forgot to follow up. It may be that his why don't you justism is unfounded in any, has no basis in reality whatsoever, either as a policy guide or as a agenda for him to follow up on in real life. Any number of combinations of reasons would have sufficed to see this not done. Although President Donald Trump tweeted that he had ordered his administration to cut off disaster aid to wildfire victims in California, federal officials confirmed on Wednesday that they never received any such directive. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, which helps survivors of national disasters recover, told BuzzFeed News for the first time that Trump never issued an order to stop sending money to California. We never got any such directive. Brandy Richard, B-R-A-N-D-I, Brandy. It's a very, it's a professional name. A FEMA spokesperson told BuzzFeed News, it's not her fault, her parents did it to her. That evidenced by the fact that work is still being done and we continue to support wildfire survivors across the state. In other words, facts contradict the president here. She's going to be fired too. The Department of Homeland Security, which oversees FEMA, so that's going to be even more than just Brock is in trouble. It's another reason to fire, what's her name? I forget already. What's the secretary's name that he's constantly mad at? Nielsen, right? Kirsten Nielsen. Okay. The Department of Homeland Security, which oversees FEMA, further confirmed the news in a Freedom of Information Act request filed January 9th on Muck Rock. The same day the president tweeted his order. I don't even know what that means, Muck Rock. Okay. That's, whatever. We'll move on. We conducted a comprehensive search of files, FEMA said in a letter. Unfortunately, we were unable to locate or identify any responsive records. Which I suppose it's possible. Maybe this is the way they want to dig their way out of this one. They just say, oh, our FOIA search was incompetent. Here's the forged order, backdated, so that it looks like it really existed. Or, they may really actually be incompetent, or it may be that they're... sometimes I wonder whether they're under instructions from the White House or somewhere in the command structure to particularly treat controversial FOIA requests as paid vacation. Just don't do anything, leave the office, go to the beach for a week, and then come back and say, I don't have any responsive documents. And see what happens. Because for the most part, it ends up lying there. News organizations don't pay for the follow-up to sue, to allege that you really didn't do any sort of serious work on the FOIA search. It's just assumed that you did your best and came up with nothing. And they're happy with the fact that they come away with a story that tends to prove that the president is a liar, and leave it at that. And if there is a lawsuit which will eventually affect whatever secret policy they think they've implemented, if they really did implement it, then and only then will they actually bother to find the order in order to justify continuing the policy. But on the other hand, if they're just faking policy, what's the point of defending a fake policy? Just let the president do what he does. He blurts things out. And if people want to waste their time and energy trying to prove that the stupid thing he said is stupid, or that the stupid thing he said is both stupid and non-existent, that's on them. We're not going to waste any of our time doing it. It's difficult to tell what to expect from a government that has at its core the notion that, hey, nobody's going to ask any questions. That's a problem. It's not good. It's not good governance. All right. In January, the article continues, Trump accused California of failing to properly manage its forests by raking to prevent wildfires and announced via Twitter that he had ordered his administration to stop sending money to hundreds of thousands of survivors. By the way, the other benefit of that play is Trump world, MAGA America, says, yeah, good. That's, I also am a why don't you just-ist. And it's good to see our president telling it like it is. He speaks for me. He says the things other people are afraid to say out loud. They say them out loud to one another all the time. It's just then people say, you're a very dumb and undereducated person, and I don't take that seriously. But now that a president who, though he is dumb and undereducated, says it, he's got a suit and tie and a big office and everything, and everybody prints it as though it's a great idea, or at least a real idea, and goes with it from there. So it may very well be that even Trump knows that he's just talking out his ass when he does those things. He just wants people to cheer for him, and he doesn't care that he doesn't follow up on the things, because the people who would cheer that aren't going to research it. And if 10% of the people who would cheer for something like that would ordinarily be disappointed to find out later that the order was never issued and never existed in the first place, fine. It doesn't matter, because all of that is explainable easily enough by saying fake news, and it doesn't even matter that, well, what do you mean fake news? They reported that he did do this. Now they're reporting that he didn't. Is that what he didn't do is fake news? Is it all fake? It's all fake. It's fake if you want it to be fake. Okay, well, maybe 10% of that 10% won't buy into the fake news thing, but that's a minuscule number. That's our rule of the tens that usually turns out to be true. All right, again, back to the story. Billions of dollars, he says in his tweet, are sent to the state of California for forest fires that with proper forest management would never happen. The president tweeted last month, unless they get their act together, which is unlikely, I have ordered FEMA to send no more money. It's a disgraceful situation in lives and money. More disgraceful, of course, would be not helping people who desperately needed it because you were angry at their state because you lost lawsuits to them on a number of occasions. But okay. Since October 2017, California has been working to recover from an unprecedented series of massive wildfires that have killed more than 130 people, destroyed hundreds of thousands of homes, and left many rural communities and towns across the state in tatters. On November 8th, the Camp Fire, the deadliest in state history, tore through the Northern California town of Paradise, or Pleasure, as the president called it, and surrounding communities, killing 85 people and burning nearly 14,000 homes. Now remember, this is a context in which the president says, no money for you because you're Democrats. That same day, the Woolsey Fire ignited near Los Angeles, ultimately torching nearly 97,000 acres. FEMA is still on the ground in several damaged communities, trying to find housing for thousands of people who lost everything. The day before, the president said he was cutting off federal disaster assistance. FEMA and California officials announced that they had extended the registration deadline because so many people were still applying. Many people are still applying. As of January 8th, more than 26,000 residents had applied for disaster assistance. After the president's tweet, which sparked widespread outrage. Don't spark anything in California if you can help it. FEMA told BuzzFeed News several times that it had no plans to no plans to stop helping survivors, but it would not confirm whether it had received a directive to cut off financial aid. And here is a set of tweets from Brianna Sachs. I guess attesting to all this is embedded in here. I'm going to skip over the embedded tweet and just imagine that it bolsters the point just previously made. Trump has repeatedly blamed California's devastating wildfires on state water policies and management of its drought-crippled wildlands, despite the fact that the federal government is responsible for 60% of the state's forests, and most of the recent blazes were urban interface fires, meaning they consumed neighborhoods. Experts, firefighters, and fire officials, and remember, Trump doesn't trust any of them because they won't let 10 billion people into his rallies, have also pushed back on the president's oversimplified analysis of why California's wildfires have become increasingly overwhelming, pointing to a confluence of factors such as climate change and urbanization that have thrust the state into uncharted territory. So there you have the basic roundup of the facts that Daniel Dale was observing. Trump said he, ordered this bold, brash, why don't you just ist policy, but in fact he did not, and that leads us to an interesting discussion. This is a habit with him. One, less interestingly, right off the bat, of course, this is another episode of How to Read a Trump Comment, trademark me. Trump said he did this thing. Now we have the facts. He did not do this thing. That is how you read a Trump comment. I said I've ordered it. The reality is he probably did not, and that's how you should read, interpret, and print a Trump comment. But perhaps more importantly, I began a brief discussion of this situation last night this way, pointing to Daniel Dale's tweet. Again, I always question the validity and even the existence of every supposed Trump order or other written communication. You've heard me do it here on the show. I literally never believe in their very existence until I see them. I was doing it just the other day. And, of course, receiving some blowback and ridicule for doing it. What were we even talking about? I forget what was the subject. Oh, yes, right. The national emergency order. How easily I forgot that. It's at the heart of our latest constitutional crisis. I've forgotten already. I've issued an order. I'm ordering the national emergency. I've declared a national emergency. This empowers me to free up certain funds. It doesn't, but that's the belief, right? Did we see this thing? I mean, he held an event, right? Said he was ordering a national emergency. Came out and talked about China and trade negotiations and how well he's doing as president for 20 minutes first, and then got around to saying, I've ordered, I'm declaring this national emergency. And right away, because it's habit for me now, did he? Did you really do that? Like I said, I literally never believe in their existence, these written communications or orders, until I see them. And I never believe in their validity until they're vetted. And you shouldn't either. And by you, I mean you. You and everybody else, of course. And particularly journalists. I absolutely think journalists can and should adopt this frame, and it's not going to be a difficult thing for them to do either. It's very journalisty. You don't even have to worry about attracting additional attention to yourself. Just add some form of the word purport into everything. Instead of, why report when you know right now at this stage of the game, even without listening to me, you're involved in a fool's errand if Trump says, I've issued XYZ order, and your headline is Trump issues XYZ order. That's already problematic, and it's going to be problematic. But it's an easy default. Is it really that difficult to get past your editor? And I mean, it's possible that editors may say, no, this carries a lot of weight. This is a loaded term. If you say Trump purportedly orders XYZ, they may say, look, you're building doubt into the headline, and that's bad. And they may fight you on that. But it's entirely justifiable. One, it's true. He did purport to have done this. And your editor will say, well, didn't he, though? But your thoroughly journalistic answer can be, I don't know. He didn't show it to us, or I didn't witness him sign the thing. And he's got a track record here of not signing stuff. Not only just blowing it out his ass and not backing it up with paper, but even when he intends to back it up with paper, he sometimes doesn't back it up with paper. More on that further into the discussion. But what you could be doing right now is simply saying, hey, he purports to have done this thing. And it's true, and it's even sort of like technical and smarty sounding, and it actually would make for good and defensible journalism. So we can't have that, obviously. That's not going to happen. Okay, so let's see. Where did we leave off on this? Right. My next tweet was admonishing people, seriously, please, stop automatically believing in the existence and validity of Trump documents of all kinds. Even the Congress, and this is where I first started with this thing, even the Congress, and perhaps especially the Congress, should stop simply accepting written communications from the president, quote unquote the president, without examination and a vote. And later on in the tweet stream, there's a little bit more of an explanation for that. I mean, we could probably just jump down there and make the thread a little less disjointed by adding that to this stream now. As I would say, as I said yesterday, C-SPAN viewers know, if there are any of you out there, that almost daily, sometimes several times a day, the Congress is briefly interrupted by announcements from the doorkeeper. I don't think you often see who's making the announcement. I think it's the doorkeeper. They're addressing the House, and it could be the clerk's office that actually takes care of this stuff and not the doorkeeper. But the main point is, if you've ever been watching C-SPAN and you've heard, Mr. Speaker, I'm ordered to deliver to the House a message in writing from the president, or a message from the president in writing, some variant of that. If you ever heard proceedings being briefly interrupted by that, you also will note that they are ordinarily, as a matter of course, accepted immediately and without any comment, no examination, certainly no debate or votes. And I'm not even sure whether or not the House rules or Senate rules contemplate allowing for such a vote, because, of course, the rules were written back in the day when there would be no point in contesting whether or not the president was the one actually sending this written communication, whether it was a valid written communication. Not speaking about legal validity, you can't vouch for that on the spot, but did he order it? Did he sign it? Has it been validly executed? Did it really come from the president? Was beyond question. It is no longer beyond question. And even just as a delaying tactic, you ought not to be accepting written communications from the president at face value. And there's, as with most things that are done automatically, there is a process, a procedure behind it that is assumed to have been observed, and that's why you can simply accept things without having a vote. Ordinarily, the skeptic would say, how would you ever know that the president had done these things? It's all a matter of trust. But like I said, there's a process and there's infrastructure behind the assumption. So what would you do if you wouldn't accept such written communications? Are you just being difficult to work with? Are you making it impossible for the president to do his job? No, you're making it more difficult for the president to do his job, and that's fine. He's not working at it anyway, so he's got plenty of time to take care of these things. But this is a luxury afforded to other presidents that this one hasn't earned. It is not hard work to sign documents properly, right? All you have to do is actually sign them. And there's a place in Congress. There's a room in the Speaker's suite of offices that is designated for the president to come and take care of this business. Make him use it, is basically what I'm saying. There's a president's signing room, is part of the Speaker of the House's suite of offices. It is usually where the president will cool his heels in advance of being introduced in the House to give his State of the Union address. And occasionally, it is still utilized for signing bills or various other orders. You would last have seen it perhaps on television on Inauguration Day, when, after the president was inaugurated on he did the West Front, right, of the Capitol. He went into this room. That was the place where you saw him sit down and purportedly, again, sign the paperwork nominating his various cabinet members to their positions. From there, the papers being carried into the Senate for their confirmation processes to begin. But they covered that extensively on television on Inauguration Day. That's the president's signing room. That's what it's there for. And it actually exists for the purpose of establishing a venue wherein the president can assure the validity of his works and his signature by signing them in front of the witnesses there in the Congress, and those papers are bound for the Congress anyway. So the infrastructure exists. Use it. Make him come to the Capitol and sign bills. Make him come to the Capitol and sign nominations papers. He's only brought this on himself. It's not you doing it, it's him. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption, though it's still aimed at saying thank you to all of you who are supporters of the show. We've made a lot of progress. When we first started this campaign, fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners were donating to help keep us on the air, and now that's down to about 1 in 15, but we've got a long way to go. Remember, it won't take much. Our average monthly donation is currently about $7, for which you're getting 2 hours of great news and entertainment 5 days a week. What's that, 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. But as a wage, well, I think Democrats would be against that. But if we all put our 70 cents together, or even half of us, that'd really be something. And my kids could go to college. Now that's not all on you, but remember, patreon.com, Patreon.com is there to make it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right there where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your continuing support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Had a little trouble getting the mute button to cooperate with me. Usually a bad sign. Maybe time to do this. It's been going on for about 3 years now. We've been predicting the death of the current microphone, but each day proves me wrong until it doesn't, and at that point we'll be awfully sad if we haven't taken care of business before then. Okay, back to last night's explainer on what people ought to be doing with this insane president who lies about everything with respect to his signed documents or the purported existence of these signed documents. The infrastructure is there. The process is there. It has come to be ignored and ignorable because, once again, 44 times in a row, we've been proven right in, generally speaking, trusting that when the president says he's going to legally execute a document, it gets done, and we don't need to check on the validity of it. We don't need to check on whether he signed it. We don't need to check on whether it says what he says it says. We can still quibble over the legal validity, and we do. That part we don't leave out, but the simple execution of the document has always been assumed, but it was assumed because, one, there was this thing called shame, and 44 presidents in a row had it, to varying degrees. And two, how did I even begin the sentence? I don't even know how I can finish this thing. But 44 presidents in a row didn't need to have their work checked like this. And this one does. And so that's what the infrastructure is there for. Make him come to Congress to sign things in front of you. Yes, that means that they'll be valid and you won't have the luxury of doubting them all the time. But it would make for an excellent delaying tactic. And I bet a lot fewer things would be purported to have been done, and many of those things are very dumb, if you made it clear that in order to have anyone believe it, it would have to be executed in front of you in Congress in the signing room. Or it could be elsewhere, but you might as well insist that he come to your turf to do these things, including, XYZ has been passed and signed by the president, signed into law. BS. Prove it. I don't know. He sometimes has signing ceremonies, but of course, what does he do? Occasionally, he'll sign a thing and then he flashes it around, but can anybody read it? It'd be awfully gutsy, of course, to flash the paper at people if it was blank. That would really be something. Or if it didn't say what you said it said, that would be unwise too. But again, most people can't read it from the distance that they're standing, nor could cameras slow it down enough, nor does he hold it still enough. And all it would take is the same guts, for lack of a better term, that it took to stand in front of everybody and say, these stacks of blank paper prove that I've divested myself from my companies, when everybody knows that he didn't divest himself from his companies. We know that, but we assume, no, it can't be that the papers are blank. They look like they're blank straight out of the package, like they just took copier paper and unwrapped it and put it in folders. Everything is all nice and neatly lined up and everything, and there's no binder clips doing that. It's just stacks and stacks of paper that perfectly lined up, and no indication that there's anything printed on any of them. But we won't ask because that I understood why they didn't do that to a degree. That's again totally contrary to all practice, all journalistic practice. No one would ever do this. No one ever has done this because no one would. This one would. You're gonna have to check. So if you're willing to stand there about that and say, I divested and these papers prove it and the papers are blank. And remember, I was reminded in the middle of this conversation that the tax attorney that accompanied him to make this claim in front of everybody during the transition is under investigation for perjury. So somebody somewhere in officialdom really does believe there's a pretty decent chance that they may be able to prove that that whole thing was a sham, top to bottom, not only blank paper, but a tax attorney willing to come and lie in front of everybody. If they're going to do that, then it's not beyond the pale that any of the rest of these accusations could be true too. That he's flashing around something other than the bill he says he's signing, something other than the executive order he says he's signing. Whether it's because there's a variance in the text or because they haven't finished the damn thing, but he scheduled the signing ceremony. So just give me something that looks official and I'll sign it and flash it around, and everyone will come to believe that it has been done. But you should, for your own sake, for legality's sake, for the Constitution's sake, you should be insisting on the paperwork. We have an archivist of the United States who collects these things and files them for a reason. Because ultimately, all of this stuff depends on there being a validly executed copy somewhere so that you can prove that the electronic copy that you circulate on the website, as they did with the order designating this so-called national emergency, is valid. Because in the middle of this stream, I was asked by one of our Daily Kos Radio listeners, Ballerina X from Twitter, saying, well, this is the emergency declaration right here. It's on the White House website. For any other of the 44 presidents, that tends to do the trick. It's usually good enough to say, well, here's the text of the order right here on the website. But I remind you, if you're having difficulty finding out whether the signed original order exists, you've got a problem with pointing me to the White House website. For Barack Obama, for anybody, whether it's Barack Obama, George Washington, he did not have a website, George Washington. Don't trust that guy. He never used links. However, for other presidents, when they said they had something, whether they put it up on the internet or otherwise, and there's only a very few presidents out of the 44 who can claim to have done that, it was assumed to be valid because, well, one, you figured they would never be stupid enough to simply say they had done it when they couldn't prove it, but the method of proof would have been, all right, Barack Obama says he signed this order. Here it is in electronic form. That doesn't mean anything to me because, as is the case with Donald Trump, this was equally true of both of them. Showing me the electronic copy of the order with the president's name typed at the bottom, that's basically what's different between that and a blog post. No one would trust it if it was a blog post, but that's what it is. It's a White House blog. And they put up the text of the order and the president's name underneath it, and that's supposed to be a stand-in for, yes, it really exists, and yes, he signed it. And if you were crazy enough to demand it of Barack Obama, they would have said, now we've got like executive order truthers out there. Fine. Just like I showed you my birth certificate, I'll show you the executive order. And the archivist of the United States could pull out the piece of parchment with the actual ink signature of Barack Obama on it and say, here is the thing. And if you sit and you look at it, you'll notice that the text that's on this parchment and the text that's in this electronic version of the document are exactly the same. No, we didn't bother putting up a PDF or a photo of the signed document because, as you know, we have an archivist, and if you really want to establish the provenance of this text on the website, we can do it. Now, if you can't do it and you go to the archivist and they say, I'm sorry, I don't have any such order, I would if it had actually existed, because that's my job. I keep them all. The fact that I don't have it means it wasn't issued. Or Nicolas Cage and the cast of National Treasure have broken in and stolen it for some unknown reason from the archivist's files. But so far, no one's been willing to allege that. It's only 10:30, 10:40, so I guess that could still happen. The day is young, as they say. But if the archivist doesn't have it, it doesn't happen. It didn't exist. And no matter what you put on the website and what president's name you type in underneath it, it won't be valid. So that's what you got to do with this guy. He's got to sign everything, and you've got to see it. Yes, as the tweet storm continues, it will cause a horrible bottleneck. It'll be a big pain in the ass, even for good things. Even good things won't happen quickly. But unless you've inspected the document, see that it says what it's purported to say, and you've seen him sign it, and I mean seen him in person sign it, and verified that the paper he's signing is the one you inspected and everything, you can't accept that it's true. No more written messages to Congress. You'll have to come to the Hill and sign it before witnesses. I'm sorry, but you brought this on yourself. So next time C-SPAN proceedings are interrupted with, Mr. Speaker, a message from the president in writing. There should have been, prior to all of that, an adjournment of some delegation of the House to the Speaker's offices, to the president's signing room, so that a dozen or more, whatever number you settle on, members of Congress inspect the document constituting the written communication from the President of the United States, witness him affix his signature to it, and then and only then can you interrupt the House proceedings with a valid message from the President of the United States in writing. It will dramatically cut down on the number of things the President is willing to send to the Congress in writing, I think, or I guess it could prompt him to do many, many more in the interest of wasting more congressional time. But, you can handle it as you see fit. If you feel like it's more important to you to move on than it is to verify the validity of the president's written communications, go ahead and do it. It's up to you. You run the place. As a reminder, midstream in all of this, of exactly how important it was, I did mention what I mentioned at the top of the show, that, although I put it in the form of a question at this point last night, didn't the White House even decline to provide the document purporting to name Matt Whitaker acting Attorney General at some point? And I got confirmation on that one from Chris Geidner, who said, I actually raised that question at some point, and I had to try and do a Freedom of Information Act request to get that document, and I haven't gotten it still. It's still the case that interested parties have never seen the document purporting to name Matt Whitaker acting Attorney General. I always said he's not the Attorney General. He's not the acting Attorney General. Stop calling him that. At the very least, call him the purported acting Attorney General. Again, my original advice to journalists. No one took me up on it, but here we are. He's done. He's finished. He's gone. The new Attorney General allegedly has taken his place. Lawsuits were filed specifically asking whether he really was acting Attorney General. No one knows. Can you imagine that, this whole thing is over and done with and we just push it aside? Because there's a million other very important questions out there that need to be asked and answered. Wasting time on whether or not Matt Whitaker was ever really acting Attorney General might seem like an unimportant one. But on the other hand, isn't it even a little bit freaking important to find out whether or not the President of the United States was lying to everybody for months on end about who was running the Justice Department? I think so. So, okay. Then we never saw that. And I went on from there with respect to this purported declaration of a national emergency. this is important too. All we really have on that one, and I asked this question and I said, why are you bothering to believe it's true? And even, listeners to the show and good progressive friends were like, this is a waste of time. What are you doing? Purporting, that the president never actually signed the thing. Here it is on it's on the website. Yeah. I know it's on the website. It's on the White House blog. All we have about this supposed national emergency, and people are suing based on the legal validity of it, but start your claim with something else, I would suggest. But look, all we've got right now is, look, what we really have in front of us, the president, just like with the FEMA situation in California, has only claimed to have issued this order establishing a national emergency. We have an electronic unsigned copy of its supposed text on the website, a blog post that says I did it, no links, and a picture of him that was circulated on Twitter, which though was time-stamped incorrectly. Did you know that? It's actually true, and one of our good friends and listeners here, Mitchell Hirsch, was the one that originally pointed this out to me. It's true. What we have by way of photographic evidence, and this is why you have to have the president sign it in front of live witnesses, is a tweet from Sarah Sanders in her press secretary account with a photo of Trump at a desk. And I mean, if you take a look at it, you can't tell whether there's anything on the paper, and he's done the blank paper trick before, as we've discussed. I'm not kidding about all this, right? What we have here is the tweet that says, President, and she uses his Twitter handle, Real Donald Trump, signs the declaration for a national emergency to address the national security and humanitarian crisis at the southern border. So, as I mentioned, it's a picture of him at the Resolute desk. I would stipulate in court that this is this is what it purports to be. It is a picture of him at the Resolute desk. That is the Oval Office. But I can't tell you what's on that paper. There's no way. Even if I enhance the photo, I can't tell what's really on that paper. And Mitchell Hirsch was pointing out to us that the tweet is time-stamped, of course, as all tweets are, 11:02 a.m., which was, of course, as he points out, while Trump was still yammering in the Rose Garden about halfway through his verbal emergency, quote-unquote, emergency press event, during which he stated that he, quote, was going to sign a declaration. So in other words, at the moment of truth there, he says, I'm going to sign the declaration. I haven't done it yet. At 11:02 a.m., he's out there in the Rose Garden saying, I'm going to sign a declaration. But by some happenstance, at 11:02, already tweeting is Sarah Sanders, sending us a picture of him supposedly actually signing it. So we have a discrepancy here. Now, maybe that one of them misspoke. That's entirely true. Or it just maybe could be another of his stupid games, or just another one of his stupid accidents, or her stupid accidents. I don't know which. What I do know is he's got a very, very, very outrageously bad track record on this question. So could be that they misspoke with President Obama, with President George W. Bush, with President Reagan. We would have said they misspoke. That wasn't it. That was the wrong picture. I sent it at the wrong time. He meant he already signed it. Whatever it is, you could get away with it. Just not this guy. So that's all you've really got with respect to this national emergency. Now, if you're going to file a lawsuit over the emergency declaration, why not take a moment? Your first step should be, and it should be, honestly, it should be the first step in every lawsuit, whoever you're suing. If you're suing over a document, there should be, a lot of people consider it a waste of time because they believe the document has been signed. They simply dispute the contents of the document or the meaning of the document. But with Trump, take a moment. the first thing you do in any lawsuit over this emergency declaration, or any other action that he takes, by the way, from now on, should be a demand of proof that the order in question even exists. Your Honor, I totally want to sue over the content of this purported declaration of a state of emergency, but I think we would all be well served here if we first established that the thing actually existed. I believe it does, because I have to say that, and because otherwise I don't get into court here. Otherwise I don't have a live controversy. But that would be interesting too, right? You should have third-party movements move to third-party petitioners to have the California suit dismissed on the grounds that the document they're challenging doesn't exist in valid form, and have the court settle it that way. You think I'm intervening to stop you from suing it and I'm pro-Trump, but believe me, I'm actually pro-you. Anyway, you need to establish that these things actually exist. By way of proof, I actually said this thing before, pointing out that everybody suing should do this. But, and we don't know necessarily why every one of these documents doesn't exist in valid form. It may be that he's speaking, he's tweeting out his ass by trying to look like a tough guy, doing a why don't you just ist threat against California. But there's also another possibility. How many times have we seen Trump absent-mindedly start wandering out of the room before signing a document, which was, by the way, the sole purpose of convening the event that he's now bugging out of in the first place? We're having a document, a bill signing, or a executive order signing ceremony. He loves having those, right? We have all seen how much he loves having those. Even as much as he loves them and as often as he does them, it's been like 5 times that we've seen him start walking out without signing. And that's just of the ones that they've covered. Imagine how often he does this in private when he's not having a ceremonial signing. Oh, sir, we need your signature on the order for White House softball team sweatshirts, whatever it is, right? Oh, yeah, I'll get to that. Oh, wait, lunch is waiting. Telly, lunch, executive time. Walk out the door, and they'll follow him around with the papers. You got to sign this. He's terrible at remembering to sign things. And that's just at the signing ceremonies, which brings us to another point, as Mitch Hirsch pointed out to us in the photo. It's an odd photo Sarah Sanders chose to show Trump signing this declaration of a national emergency, in that ordinarily, this is the sort of thing that Trump revels in signing at a big ceremony. It has supporters standing behind him and using multiple pens, as presidents often do, and handing out the pens as souvenirs. There are while it's true that Republican senators say they're all worried about the implications of this order, so it won't necessarily be them, but it could be other crazies and idiots who happen to be in Washington at the time who want to be photographed standing behind the president signing this stupid executive order or declaration of a national emergency. Here, he's all alone. Very unusual, very suspect. You don't see it very often. I'm sure he does it from time to time alone, but in combination with the fact that the thing is time-stamped wrong and he says he hasn't done it at that point, leads me to suspect that they just pulled a file photo of the president with papers in front of him and a pen in his hand. He might not even be signing anything in that photo. I wouldn't doubt that there are stock photos in this Oval Office, and probably even in previous Oval Offices, where they just say, let's take some wild shots of you, Mr. President, at the desk. Very good. Do some that are studious. You're reading papers. Maybe put your feet up on the desk before they decided that was impermissible when Obama did it. Or how about you signing something, looking all executive, just like the B-roll film we have that's now famous as memes on Twitter of Mitch McConnell sitting at his desk looking up and smiling, rifling through papers. Political commercials are full of that kind of B-roll stuff. Of just, milling about, talking with people in a meeting, pointing to something, this could just be an official-ish looking stock photo, and he hadn't signed it yet, but Sarah Sanders was under pressure to put something out so that it looked like the job had been done. She just pulled a photo and said, this is a photo of the president signing that very order. And it isn't. We don't know. Anyway, so once again, I just remind everybody, even if you don't believe that there's a real reason to doubt every single Trump document or pronouncement, you should demand formal proof of the existence and validity of every Trump communication anyway, if for no other reason than as a delaying tactic. Far fewer dumb things can be purported to have happened such that the public will believe them and act on them as though they have happened if it takes 25 days to verify every stupid thing he says before anyone will believe it. But in addition to being a delaying tactic that can be useful in certain circumstances, you'll also be right. And with shocking frequency, it will very often turn out to be the case, despite all the odds, that you are correct and that the document doesn't exist or wasn't signed properly or had a typo in it, anything. Let's see. So, yeah, that's basically it. Then I, by the way, retweeted a little bit of the history of my saying this. You don't need a reminder of that here on the show. You've heard me say it 100 times that this should be happening, and you know it to be true. So, I guess lastly, as a couple of closing comments on this subject, I marvel again at the journalistic aspect of it. For 2 years now, and I guess even longer, because he's been doing this even as he was doing this even as a candidate in the early days. 2 years, 3 years, maybe 4 years of reporters tiptoeing around on every other subject and insisting that the most that can safely be said about any of these situations is that Trump maybe, quote, allegedly made misleading statements, but no one will say he's lied. He's a liar. Trump lies. That we have that fight constantly. We talk about it constantly on the show, right? This is what you get because they're trying to be legally precise so they don't get themselves in trouble. And yet, there's no attention paid to being legally precise about whether or not Trump has ordered this thing or has signed that thing. They just assume that because he says he has, he has. In other words, precision when it comes to correctly labeling him a liar because he might get mad and attack you or have someone send you a bomb, and that's a legitimate worry, right? But no interest for some reason in being precise when the opposite obtains. Maybe he didn't sign this thing. All I know is he says he did. Why not say he purports to have signed this bill? Why not? Right? So amazing that there's all this tiptoeing around for all this time and allegedly made misleading statements, so we can't be sure of what his state of mind was or whether he intended to deceive. But still an automatic assumption that the president has issued an order or has signed a bill, and the no appearance of any halting legalese in those headlines, though they're entirely justified. At this point, yes, what that means is that when the president comes out to speak at a press conference, I don't even know that it's the president. I don't know anybody who can imitate him quite like he can do it himself, but what do I know about this guy? Even then, at this point, all the White House is purporting is that this is the president. I'll tell you what, you come out, you want to give a press conference in the Rose Garden about an emergency declaration, fine. I'm going to need a photo ID proving that you look like that photo ID. And, just to be sure that you're not just some goon in a wig and orange makeup, because why would the president just be, the purported president just be a goon in a wig and orange makeup? Oh, because the actual president is a goon in a wig and orange makeup? Oh, that is weird. Okay, so photo ID and let's say DNA test. Swab your inside of your cheek, and we'll be back as soon as possible. And once we've established that you are the person in this photo ID, we'll let you get on with your Rose Garden press conference. I think, if you need a photo ID to vote, you should need a photo ID to be president of the United States. So, I don't know. It's this is not too much to ask at this point, I think. And yet, I have this sneaking suspicion that it will not be asked. But the least you could do is at least say, you really have to stop taking his word for it when he says he has done these things. Let's see. Ballerina X has sent us one more item on this. Daniel Dale, Trump tweeted that he had ordered FEMA to stop. Oh, yes. Well, this is what we were talking about last night. Here we go. All right. Well, did you miss the introduction to this last night? This is what sparked the whole thing. But thank you for, well, I'm glad you stumbled upon it yourself. And terrific. Although, unless I guess I'm under time pressure and I now can't figure out exactly what's going on and what you meant by the tweet. But I think you're just sending me the piece that started this whole conversation in the first place. So you're on topic. At least we've got that. Speaking of on topic, let's forget about this stupid topic already and move on to the topics that Justice Putnam has lined up for us on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next here on Netroots Radio. Let's talk about some of those real quick. Let's see. Trump fired Comey in part because Comey hadn't fired McCabe. That's interesting. And then Indiana Republican lawmakers stripped the state's hate crimes bill of any hate crimes protections. That sounds sort of counterproductive, but that's Indiana for you.
From
There's more
Daily
after
Codes
this.
Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
More here. House GOP has issued new demands to take food away from families in need. Luckily, they're not relevant anymore. And House Democrats say the Trump administration has interfered with an investigation of Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. We got a hint about that yesterday. Jeanine Pirro going to be in the news today, too. Justice has that and more for you next.